I'm Olivia. I'm the Witch of Wonderlist here on YouTube and on Instagram, and today I've got an awesome guest for you. I have Ryan, also known as the Mestizo Mystic on Instagram, and their practice consists of blending pre- and post-colonial traditions of their ancestors. Their craft is mostly influenced by Mexican folk magic, as well as some indigenous Filipino spirituality. They're a devotee of La Virgen de Guadalupe and La Santa Muerte, and she loves working with saints and Catholic spirits. His queerness heavily influences the way in which they navigate their spirituality and their beliefs. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce you to Ryan.
Yeah, we've begun. We've started. Also, you use all pronouns, right? That's correct?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so I'm obnoxious, so I'm gonna use that as a challenge that if I can use as many as I can possible, I probably will.
I love that. I can't be defined.
I know, I love it. You are the liminal space. Okay, so, man, where do we start? I found you on Instagram. Maybe I found you through a podcast. I don't know. One or the other. I found you through one or the other because the Red Text podcast. Love that podcast. Now that I love your Instagram, it's so because you're very Catholic based, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I think a big thing that drew me to you, especially, is that you're also half Filipino.
Yes, half Filipino. Yes.
Okay. And so it's nice to meet other practitioners who are also half Filipino and are trying to kind of like go back and connect with those roots and stuff. I do find it interesting that you are also a Catholic folk witch, though. So, like, I mean, the Philippines is very Catholic, so that makes sense. But I do find it's like one or the other of like they're either very folk based or they're very like Catholicism is woven in there. So there's kind of like that back and forth. Can you tell me a little bit more about like what your practice looks like where it started, what origin story type of thing?
Yeah, totally. So it all started back in 2016. I was born and raised Catholic, and I was always drawn to it. But like as I started to grow into my queer identity, especially in my teens, like I felt that very cognitive dissociation of like, how can I be queer and Catholic at the same time while the church is saying like I'm going to hell for it? So I very much drifted away from Catholicism during my late teens, early college years. And then I had a friend gift me my first tarot deck for I think it was like my 20th birthday or something like that back in 2016. And as I was starting to read tarot, that got me more into like astrology and just very new age spirituality. And so since I put Catholicism back on the back burner, I was studying like Hinduism, Buddhism, very much Eastern spirituality and religions on top of like, new age, like crystals, meditation and tarot. And then maybe like 2 years after that started, I want to say in 2018, 2019, I read this book called The Way of the Rose, which is all about finding the path to the divine feminine through praying the rosary. And that doesn't even specifically mean just Mary, but however we connect with the divine feminine. But for me, Mother Mary like popped up and out and was like, hey, nice to see you again. And so she kind of drew me back to full Catholicism through the rosary. But shortly before that, I'd also felt very drawn to Santa Muerte. I no longer associate with them, unfortunately, but the person whose page I discovered Santa Muerte from, I just started researching it more and like connecting with the history of Santa Muerte. Because on my other half, that's non-Filipino, it's a mix of white and Mexican. And so it felt really wonderful to discover this spirit that is a patron of the marginalized and the oppressed, who accepts you no matter if you're queer, no matter the color of your skin, no matter your background, whether you're a saint, a sinner, a criminal, a politician, someone serving food at the soup kitchen on Sundays, it doesn't matter. She takes everyone and everyone. And she kind of also helped lead me back to full Catholicism, funny enough, because obviously Mexico is very, very Catholic. And so her roots are in Mexico. We can't neglect that. And so it was Santa Muerte and the Blessed Virgin Mary, especially in her form of La Virgen de Guadalupe, that really just brought me back to being able to more comfortably embrace Catholicism, which all, funny enough, started with the rosary. And then witchcraft, I still balance that out too, because is Santa Muerte in her aspect of La Negra, the Black Santa Muerte, is also known as La Reina de las Brujas, the Queen of the Witches. And so I don't work with too many like land spirits or really deities at all, but I feel like Santa Muerte is the one who's really guided me to my mentors who have taught me my background in Mexican folk magic. And that includes like hechiceria, brujeria, curanderismo. And that's more where like my witchcraft side comes from. And it's just beautiful because it all blends so well together. Because if you look at like the practices in Mexico, a lot of people will be practicing brujeria or curanderismo, but not necessarily like always labeling it as such, right? It's just part of the culture. And I realized that's just kind of what reflected in my practice too. Like a lot of my work is devotional, yes, but the magic that I do is heavily guided through Santa Muerte. Did I answer the question? Did I veer too much?
Yeah, no, veer.
Okay.
Go ahead, just veer. If you didn't answer the question, I will get us back on track. Or if I don't notice, then it wasn't that important. It's fine.
Okay.
And whatever you were saying was more interesting anyway, so don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so but yeah, that's why I say folk Catholic, because while I do think the church, there are like great teachings and they have come to some pretty valid points on mysticism and spirituality. I hate institutions. I hate hierarchies, being told what to do. And that's not to like shit on any practices, like let's say, like, you know, for instance, Santeria or voodoo, like these initiatory practices that do require some sort of structure. But I'm just talking about like power structure in terms of like the institutional Catholic Church. And so a lot of my witchcraft stems from kind of breaking those rules, you know, like generally, traditionally, priests are the only ones who can bless things, but I bless things either in my name or in the name of God or through Mary constantly, right? So that's kind of like taboo right there. So a lot of my witchcraft comes from kind of breaking the tradition of Catholicism, but using the elements of Catholicism to kind of still affect my reality how I want in terms of practicing magic.
I love meeting folk Catholic practitioners, as you've put it. I love that just because that's how it feels. You know, I did grow up also with a lot of Catholicism influences. At the time as I was growing up, they were veering from Catholicism over to Christianity, but still there's a lot of Catholicism like folk practices. And just as what you said of like, they will not label it as anything. It's not magic, it's not witchcraft, but it is influencing energy, right? Like they are telling you to light a candle and pray to something, or to pray to a saint, or you know, to put that intention out there. And there are a lot of little practices that are kind of just sprinkled out throughout all of those things that you're like, looking back, you're kind of like, you know, that's, I still do that, you know.
Right.
Interesting. I Okay, wait, there's two total different questions that I have in here, but first let's go to, since we're on the topic, do you have any go-to folk charms or spells that you're like, this is what I do like every week, every day, or just like, I need protection and I know exactly what I'm doing. I need money, I know exactly what I'm doing. Like, do you have something that's just like a go-to charm for yourself that you just love?
Yeah, so originally the rosary for me was just a form of devotion, but now like I just use it for petitioning constantly, because a lot of there was an apparition of the Virgin Mary who said to pray the rosary, and that she promised 15 promises to those who pray the rosary daily. And one of those is that, you know, you have access to the entire heavenly court. So angels, archangels, the saints, everything and everyone that's in heaven. So that's why most of my practice is still through the rosary, because pretty much everything I do, everything I petition, I'm not one to write petitions. It's always just I'll pray the whole rosary, and at the end of it, you know, offer my petition up. So that's always been like my go-to. As a neurodivergent person, I always go to like fiddle with it too. So if I'm anxious, you know, just holding something, but especially my rosary, but just that's like my gateway to what I would say the rest of my magic is just through the rosary. Because again, even not in the new age sense of angels and archangels, but like the actual mystical, like biblically accurate angels, what they can bring into your life or take out of it, like you can get all of that through the rosary. So I would say the rosary has just been my number one tool that's not only led me to my practice, but is like the focal point of my practice for sure. And not even just with Mary too. I have a rosary specifically for Santa Muerte, and so I'll use that to petition her as well.
That's awesome. Do you have like specific stones or wood that your rosary is made out of?
Yeah, so this rosary I have right here, I carry this with me every day, specifically the connectors, a little Guadalupe. This is olive wood, and olive wood, for those who are unfamiliar, is very holy, predominantly featured throughout Christianity. And I think one of its connections as well is to ancestors. And so La Virgen de Guadalupe, you know, being syncretized from Tonantzin, the Mexica, I believe Mexica, or Aztec goddess of the earth, not only connects me to my ancestry, but I feel like it connects me to the earth. And then I had my Santa Muerte rosary custom made through a mutual of mine on Instagram. Her at the Stormy Witch, and it's made with amethyst for the decades, and then for the mysteries, it's moonstone. And so just very like I wear that every day too. Just feels protective, and it's like very hefty. And then just like for psychic protection, but also again just amplifying those petitions, because amethyst is a great. I don't work with crystals too much, but like at least with that rosary, I just feel like it amplifies anything that like I'm praying with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm not really much of a crystal worker, but they are really pretty. And also
Yeah.
like I could, you know, I could just sit there and hold one all day, and like I won't do anything with it, but I'll hold it all day. I also really like that you're Santa Muerte devotee.
Mhm.
I think that's really interesting, especially being that you are heavily involved in like a Catholic practice. What is that like? Because a lot of the time, it seems like people are Santa Muerte devotees, and then the Catholic side is kind of like, it's acknowledged, but it's not involved, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so my teachers always taught me you can't really separate the elements of Catholicism from Santa Muerte because, again, she appeared in Catholic or predominantly Catholic Mexico, and there are a lot of elements to her practice that stem from her Catholic following because a lot of her devotees are also Catholic. But I feel like a lot of devotees in the West, because of their religious trauma, try to separate those elements. But really, I think it's a matter of learning how to work with them and not against them. It's like working with a deity who loves apples and offering as offerings, but like say you just hate apples and then not ever giving it to that deity. You know, like you need to find the balance of like, okay, that might make me uncomfortable, but like if I want to work with the spirit, this is what they like. This is what's tradition for them. I have to learn how to work with that, even if it goes against like out of my comfort zone, you know? And so it's funny because I work in banking and the branch I'm currently at right now is in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. But there's also a lot of stigma around Santa Muerte and her devotees because a lot of people just see it portrayed as like, you know, cartel members that like pray to her and stuff because that's what gets featured in the news. So sometimes when I'm at work, I'll tuck my Santa Muerte pendant away because I've received judgment before. But I've also had customers come in who are like, is that a Santa Muerte pendant? And like, then show me theirs. And I'm just like, that's so cool. But one time I had a customer who thought it was St. Judas and I was like, no, it's Santa Muerte. She kind of just like gave me this look like up and down. She's like, oh, okay. And then like, you know, took her money and went. I was like, okay.
Oh no. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess it just depends on how they perceive her, and
Mhm.
also, you know, that relationship of I think a relationship of death and relationship of darker deities, as in energy wise dark, not like evil.
Mhm.
Just to throw that out for anybody listening. Yeah. So what kind of tips or advice would you give somebody if they were interested in working in folk Catholicism, or even with Santa Muerte?
Yeah, so definitely do different paths because working with Santa Muerte can be extremely heavy. And while she accepts everyone, regardless of your background or skin color, she's not necessarily always going to want to work with you. So, and also just because she is a very powerful spirit doesn't mean she needs to be the first one that you kind of like hop on working with. That just happened to be what happened for me. Like I started calling myself a devotee pretty quickly, which like most people should never do. But for me, like she just came so prevalently in my life and worked so quickly that it just felt right. Like it just felt when I started working with her, it felt like I was coming home to something. So it just felt right to call myself a devotee. But again, you're working with death. You know, she's not just an aspect of death, she is death herself. Santa Muerte is Spanish for the holy death. And it can be really like for those familiar with tarot, like it's very tower energy. Like she's gonna cut shit out of your life to get you where you want to be. Like when you work with death, the things that don't serve you are gonna die. And it hurts and it's painful, but like man, how many Phoenix moments have I had where I'm like rising from the ashes where I'm like, whoa, okay, I see why you did that or why you removed that person or situation from me. Um, Now with folk Catholicism, I think it's beautiful because like you were mentioning, there's just so much magic and mysticism within the Catholic tradition, specifically Catholic. I'm not talking about like Protestantism or Anglicanism, but like the Catholic Church, right? Like the sacraments of turning. Literally, we believe as Catholics that the bread, the Eucharist, and the wine used in church turn into the body and blood of Christ. It's not metaphorical like other denominations of Christianity believe. So like that in and of itself is a full-on ceremonial magic ritual, right? But for me as a queer person, as a marginalized queer person, non-binary person of color, like I love that I'm able to take these elements, but like make it my own, you know, like flipping the dogma of the church on its head and like reaching my own UPG through the elements of Catholicism, such as, you know, using the rosary for magic, because most people are just going to use it for praying and you can get a lot done with prayer. But when I'm using it for like, you know, spell work or doing a novena while burning candles just with oils and herbs, you know, it just feels so powerful because it's almost like an egregoric effect, right? So many people believe in Christianity, Catholicism that when you're tapping into those elements, especially for magic, you're tapping into such a treasury of magic that like so many people stray away from because of religious trauma, which is completely valid. But if like you're able to get out of that comfort zone and work with it and see what you can accomplish with it, like that's why I don't do so much, I would say, witchcraft anymore, because I'm able to get everything I need or want through the use of the rosary, through working with saints and angels. And now when it's something more physical or material I do want or need, like that's when I dive more into the witchcraft side or with Santa Muerte, because I know that as long as I give her the proper honor and offerings, like she's going to help me out on the material plane. Because La Roja, the red aspect of her, she's all known about being the earth, being the physical realm, and she'll get you, you know, money, love, lust, sex, whatever. So it's interesting because, you know, sometimes I'll feel weird praying to like a saint for something that feels so material, but then I know I have Santísima Muerte who's like willing to help me out with that. So, and they intertwine since she has her roots in Catholic Mexico. So I'm like, okay, I can't go down this path because it just feels a little, I guess, too quote unquote holy. Like, oh, I'm not gonna ask Mother Mary for some dick. Like maybe someone will. That's totally fine. But for me, I'm just like, let me go ask Santa Muerte for that.
Mother Mary would be like, girl,
She's
okay.
like,
But like, that's, oh my God. Wow, that's good. I should just like take that clip and put it in the very beginning of like so we really get into it. I'm not gonna ask Mother Mary for some dick, like, and then it just love that. Oh, I love that. Okay, so let's move into the piece that I immediately connected with you when I first came across your content. And actually, I think Santisima Muerte was the first podcast episode that I came across of yours. And then I think I found your Instagram. Doesn't matter, whatever. But either way, we're half Filipino, and also we are both death workers in a way. We both work with death. And it's hard. It really is hard to find practitioners who are kind of going back into the Filipino pre-colonized work,
Mhm.
and it's also really hard to find any information on that.
Absolutely.
How have you gone about that? How have you used that and connected that into your work, into your practice, and your life, like resources? Give it all to me.
Yeah, so it's so funny. I distinctly remember early on in my spiritual practice when I was mainly focusing on sigil work, just because it seemed so easy at the time, but also like powerful. I distinctly remember doing sigils like, please help me like connect with people who like align with my spiritual path, like help me find the right mentors and teachers and just other students and mentors and peers. And slowly over time, that just continued to like snowball into effect. And really, it was because of Instagram. My friend Dalia, her Instagram's at Dalia Teros. She's the one who originally added me to a group full of other practitioners. And it was mainly just for engagement, just sharing and liking each other's posts. But we also became like a small family. And the more my page grew, the more I met other Filipinx practitioners. And like you said, it is so hard to find information before the Philippines were colonized in terms of like what those practices were. But I did connect with some elders out in the Philippines, and they're initiated into like a Wiccan tradition. I think it's like Corwellian Wicca or something like that, but they're also working to reconstruct the pre-colonial Filipino tradition. So they gave me some information when I asked, and I also had like a separate group of like strictly Filipinx practitioners, and so I would learn from them as well. Because again, growing up half Filipino and half white and Mexican, like those are both just very Catholic sides. I didn't really learn any like Filipino folk magic from my Filipino side. It was all just Catholicism. But I was able to learn from these other practitioners who were either born and raised in the Philippines and are in the States, or just like at least were raised like in those traditions. And it's still so much to learn. Like I haven't dived too much into it other than learning like how to write in Babayan. And I've only ever like reached out to like maybe 2 different Filipino deities. Cause again, there's just like the information you'll find maybe 1 paragraph on 1 deity, and then the rest is kind of just up to UPG to know what to do. And it can be really daunting and terrifying, because you're like, what if I do something wrong? Are they going to like this? And so, yeah, it's just been a journey. The only book I've really read was Way of the Ancient Healer by Virgil Apostol Mayor. I think I might be mixing his name up.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
I was like, I have it right here on my favorite shelf.
Yes. And so I haven't finished it, but that's was kind of my intro. And then as well as the information from my elders from, I think it's called Luntiang Agama, and just again, networking with those other Filipinx practitioners. And so they're way more knowledgeable than me. And so they're the ones I usually turn to for help in terms of like my Filipino side of the practice. But again, it's also just UPG for me as well. But, it's very interesting just being a mixed practitioner, because if you have so many different ethnic backgrounds, it's kind of like, well, which way do I go in terms of my spiritual practice? Like, do I pursue one and neglect the others? Or do I take time with each one? Or like, what do I do? And so like folk Catholicism really brought me back to my roots in terms of like post-colonial ancestry and what they all practiced. But then I feel like if it wasn't for magic, I really wouldn't know anything about my Filipino background or have like cared to research it more. But since I wanted to know more about like the mythology and the tradition, that's when I started to like pray more to my strictly Filipino ancestors. And that's when I met more of those Filipinx practitioners. So it was, again, just puzzle blocks falling into place. But yeah, I don't have like too many like actual resources. Like I have like 2 giant like encyclopedias of like Filipino mythology or superstition, but it's all written by I think it's like a priest or something. So you kind of got to take it from like the outsider's view. And then Way of the Ancient Healer, I think those are really like the only main resources I have. But I know that Virgil Mayor Apostol is based in, I want to say either Los Angeles or somewhere in SoCal. And like he teaches some things like Ablon, which is like a seated form of like not massage therapy, but like adjusting like your bones and moving your body so you can be more flexible. And it's also like a healing art. He teaches that in SoCal, and I want to go learn so badly, because it's like, how many people do you like meet that are still keeping those traditions alive? And then I know my elders I mentioned in the Philippines, you can do it virtually, but I want to do it in person. It's a 2-week long program where they teach hilo, which is more of a form of massage therapy, but also like a spiritual element into it. But they teach you like also like divination, or like all pre-colonial like divination, and certain like magical practices too. And I'm like, that is like the intensive that I need. Like that, I know whenever I've never been able to go to the Philippines yet. My dad has, but he's never taken me. And I know like once I can afford to go out there for that 2-week period and take that class, I know everything is for sure going to shift, because like there's, as far as I know, there's no one out here, even in the Bay Area where I live, like that I know is teaching pre-colonial like practices, like maybe practitioners that have their own practice, but not like someone who's an elder that has been, carrying these things on. So it is difficult to kind of gather where to learn from. And especially if you're kind of like distance from your family, or you don't know how to bring it up. Again, my grandma's just heavily Catholic, so I'm not going to go up to her and be like, hey grandma, like, do you know any magic that, brought back from the Philippines? I feel like she'd have a heart attack on the spot.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to go, especially to the Filipino side, because like you said, it is heavily Catholic. So you can't really be like, so what are the folk practices? They'd be like, God is the and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's not a lot of information. Baybayin has been a really big piece of my practice for a while now, because it feels like again, like sigil work, right? Like it's the most accessible it feels, and it's generally pretty easy to learn the sounds correlating with each symbol. And there is an oracle, I believe, that somebody came up with of just like the meanings of each one. And I actually have some dice that I drew a couple of the symbols on, and I use them for divination sometimes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's fun. And then I do try to like put them on my candles, or just kind of like incorporate it. I've used the symbols and like combined them and kind of switched them around, or tried to change them to make them some kind of sigil or whatever. And they feel a lot more like me, instead of doing something like the really common one where you like write out the phrase and then like X out the words, and
Right.
like, which I have done also, but I do really like the way that the Babayan comes out, and I just feel more connected to it. You're gonna have to give me a link for both. You said Dahlia Tarot.
Yes.
Okay, you're gonna have to write that down for me, and then also that 2-week course class thing. Please send that to me also, and I will also be hoping to maybe do that one day.
Totally.
Well, do you have any like UPG with your Filipino practice that you'd be willing to share that you're interested in?
Yeah. No, totally. I wish I wrote it down, because at the time that it all like happened and was cohesive, it was just so much at once. But like it was almost the syncretization between the Blessed Virgin Mary, specifically in her form known as Stella Maris, or Star of the Sea, as well as Kuan Yin, who's a Buddhist, why am I blinking on the word right now? Bodhisattva, and Tala, who is the goddess of was it Tala? Yeah, Tala, the goddess of the stars in the Tagalog region of the Philippines. And for those interested in looking at Filipino mythology, there's like 7,000 islands, and each region has their own different like pantheons and mythology.
So much. There's so much going on.
It's wild. But yeah, it's like just like in my own UPG found this connection between like the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, who like I have a practice with, and then Mother Mary in her form of Stella Maris, and then Tala as goddess of the constellations, because she's also kind of a patron of like seafarers and sailors and fishermen. And it's funny because a lot of my dad, including a lot of my uncles and my Filipino side of the family, all fish. And Stella Maris, that aspect of Mother Mary, Star of the Sea, again, also patronage of those on the sea, sailors and fishermen and whatnot. But also a cult text that I had read actually connected Kuan Yin with the same thing as well. And then I realized, like, I just saw these connections. I'm blanking on the specifics because I'm horrible with writing things down. I'm just like, I'll remember it later. And then I don't.
Yeah.
And I was just seeing all these connections, because not only are they similar spirits, like I would never say they're the same, right? I wouldn't say, oh, you want to work with Tala, just work with Kuan Yin. But I was just starting to see like, oh, I'm now noticing why all of these spirits kind of popped up in my life. It's all this connection of like the element of water, my family of fishermen, but also just like their patronages and how their spirits work in tandem, but also as individuals. And that blew me away. Like I don't work too much with angel numbers. Like there are like numbers that will come up that I'll see that I'm like, oh, I know like spirits trying to tell me something. Cause like for instance, the UPG with these three spirits, it was 444. Like I just connected that originally with Mother Mary and then started to see it more with the La and Kuan Yin as well. But it was just so cool to see like three different aspects of my spiritual practice all find like a synchronous meaning, and it like just blew me out of the water. Aside from that, I'm blanking on anything else exactly. I know one time I do have a funny story. I wanted to work with Mayari, who is the goddess of the moon in the Tagalog mythology, and who's also a brother of Apolaki, who's the only other Dewata that I've really reached out to. And the story of like Apolaki and Apolaki and Mayari is that they fought as brother and sister to see who was going to take over the heavens once the supreme creator, Batala, was about to die. And Apolaki struck Mayari and she lost an eye. And that's why the moon's more dimmer than the sun at night. Anyways, I was trying to reach out to her, and I was one day I was at work and I was walking in my car to take a nap on my lunch break, as I did every day. And it was the one time I didn't wear my sunglasses. And I don't know if it was a leaf or what, but something flew out of somewhere and literally scratched my cornea. I had to leave work early. I was supposed to go to a rave that night. Instead, I was at the ER because my eye was just in so much pain. I was like, is this my auntie's like sick, twisted way of being like, hey, I see you with one eye? And like, that was just hilarious because I'm like, I feel like this was the most like, and I just connected with another Filipinx practitioner in the Bay Area who like heavily worked with Mayari. And so like for me to have done that and that happened, I brought that up with them and they were cracking up. They're like, yeah, that's her. And I was like, okay,
Oh
cool.
my
Well, I
God.
would have appreciated any other sign instead of sending me to the ER with the scratched cornea, but thanks.
You know what's so crazy is, I mean, it's not like nearly to the extent of your situation, but especially when I first started, you know, like really putting my Filipino ancestors on my ancestor altar. So I started kind of working with that. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to learn about the mythology, Mayari. So I was like, interested, you know, because of course you're like, okay, the moon, like that's an easy in, right? Especially if you're like already practicing, if you're already just like working with like natural forces, you're like, okay, the moon, a moon deity, like that's a safe bet.
Right.
And as I was researching her for a solid like few months, just like here and there, every sunglasses, like every single one popped out like in just one eye, only in one. And I was like every time I was like, and it would be out of nowhere. Like, the first time was my fault. I like had it on my, like just hanging on my shirt, and I had two backpacks and I was like, you know, wiggling around and it popped out and I was like, whatever. But then I had like different pairs of sunglasses that I was using and I was like putting them on and like literally I'd be driving and it would just like pop out. Like I'd be like, and so, and it was the same side every single time. And so I was
What?
just like, is this like a funny way of being like, I see you researching me? I don't know. Like I was like, this is weird. But I mean, after I kind of like felt like I did my research and moved on, like my sunglasses have been fine. But I just think that it's like funny that I'm like, that's a very specific thing to happen when I'm researching a very specific deity.
Right.
It's
Spirits have
really
such a
funny.
funny, yeah, no, spirits have such a funny way of communicating. Like
They
back in
do.
February, my cat passed away because we had to put him down due to some health issues. And that was what prompted me to reach out to St. Francis. And I hadn't worked like too intimately with any saints that at that point yet in February. Like I mainly just, you know, work with Mary and something with. And I'm like, okay, let me try actually like working like with the in-depth relationship with the saint. So St. Francis is a patron saint of animals and the environment. So I was like, hey, like, you know, I'm crying, my cat's dead. I'm praying to him. I'm like, can you just give me a sign that like, you know, my cat Pumpkin's like crossed over, is like somewhere happy. And like he came through so quickly, but in the most mundane ways. Like I think a couple nights after my cat passed and I prayed to St. Francis, I went to go hang out with my friend at his apartment, and he has a cat, and that cat was loving all up on me. And I didn't know it was an orange tabby. My cat was a fat orange tabby named Pumpkin. He lived up to his name. God rest his soul. But yeah, so I go to my friend's apartment and this orange tabby comes out and it's like loving all up on me. And he was just looking at me like, my friend was looking at me awestruck. He was like, he does not come out for anybody. Like he does not say, like he is such a skittish cat. And he was like, even my best friend that comes over like once or twice a week, that cat still doesn't like warm up to her like that. And so I knew in the bottom of my heart, like that had to have been St. Francis, because like there's a famous story of him where he preached to a bunch of birds and then like they flew away once he was done. And I just know that was him like kind of giving me that sign. Like I don't know if maybe Pumpkin was possessing my friend's cat or just like or
Oh,
what, but I was just like, all right, I see you, St. Francis. Like you heard
no,
me.
that's a
Like
heartwarming story. I
yeah.
think I remember you telling. I don't know if that was on the podcast or if you mentioned that somewhere on your Instagram, but yeah, that is a really heartwarming story. And I was like, that's just so sweet.
Yeah. So spirits send messages in the funniest and strangest of ways for sure.
They really do. Oh, you know what? Let's loop back. I think, let me check time. Okay. Let's loop back to the Santa Muerte because I actually just spoke to Francisco and we had a whole conversation about the Santa Muerte. So that was really interesting. And it always comes up of, how intense she is.
Mhm.
And that's not a bad thing. It's just that she is intense. So I'm curious if you have any like situations or instances of interacting with her, or maybe like something that she gave to you or took away, or just anything with her that you'd be willing to share of just kind of like that experience.
Totally. So I want to just content warning, like this is going to go into mental health and also talking about like suicide and suicidal ideation. But I since my late teens, I have struggled a lot with suicidal ideation. I've never fully attempted, but it's always just been something that's like, it's heavy. It's heavy to deal with, to not want to feel alive or want to like end your life. And it's always come in waves throughout my life. But when I was working with Santa Muerte, I forgot how deep into my practice this was. And the funny thing was, I wasn't even feeling suicidal at the time this happened, but I had a extremely I have very very vivid dreams every night almost, but like this one was just so vivid. I was actually sitting kind of in this area of my living room and I have these pretty large windows, and I remember that like I just remember seeing her. I'm on like the upper unit of a house, so I remember seeing her like outside the window floating. And in the dream, like I'd wanted to die. I was like planning to kill myself, like writing out like a note and everything. And it was kind of like a what's the name of the movie, like Christmas Past, or where the Scrooge and the
Oh
ghosts and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Ghost of Christmas Past, something like
Yeah, something like that. And it
that.
was it was very much a moment like that where she started taking me through, oh forgive me, I think someone's ringing the doorbell for a package. She like took me through my spirit, at least, to like the future after I'd killed myself, and showed me like the grieving like friends and family. And like I woke up like crying. I was like, oh my God, like I wasn't even feeling suicidal prior to having this dream, but like it just kind of made like it shocked me, and it just made me have like a newfound appreciation for life. Because again, as someone who struggles with suicidal ideation, there's times where it just feels like life isn't worth living. And even though I was in a mentally stable place when that dream happened, I just still woke up with like kind of an awestruck of like, ooh, wow, I am grateful for all these people that I like. She showed me grieving, and I'm just grateful right now to be alive and to know that like these people love me that much, that obviously seeing their pain if I were to pass away. um that was really powerful. And she's come to me a couple of other times. I can count on one hand how many times she's come to me in my dreams, because my dreams are always mostly how I get messages from ancestors and spirits and deities and things of that nature. um but that was a really potent experience. And then again, working with her, I just started to connect with more and more devotees. Like Dalia, who I mentioned earlier, is also a Santa Muerte devotee. And it was really when I met my mentors and teachers at City Alchemist, Alexis and Eric. They're a queer Latino couple that I absolutely adore. I took a 6-month long intensive all about Santa Muerte with Alexis, and it just like revamped my practice. And it was so cool because, oh, here's another experience. This one blew me the fuck away. So I had some roommates that I was living with, and they were moving out one month. And I was like stressing about finding a roommate. Living in San Francisco, it can be really strenuous. It's expensive. Like you can't afford an extra month's rent if someone like leaves a room open, right? And I was just praying and praying. And then like I was single at the time, so I was on Grindr, and I had gone on a date with this one person. But right before we went on a date, I had a bad experience with someone else because he saw my Santa Muerte pendant and was like, "Oh, is that Santa Muerte?" I'm like, "Yeah, I practice like brujeria and some other stuff. Like when we go on our first date, I could tell you about it." And he's like, "No, that scares me," and then blocked me. And so then I met this friend. Their name is Shane. They hit me up, and at one point they were like, "Oh, is that a Santa Muerte pendant?" And I'm proud of her. I love her. I'm devoted to her. And I was like, "Yeah, it is. Like, what about it?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm a devotee too." Fucking turns out he lived 2 blocks from me and had just moved from the East Coast and lived 2 blocks from me. And we met off Grindr. We went on a date, but we ended up being literally the closest of friends that I've ever had, and to this day still are. We met a year ago, and he's the one who ended up moving in. And so we had like a shared Santa Muerte altar, which used to be over here prior to him moving out. And we would do like spell work and ceremony together with her, since we were just both intense devotees of hers. And we took that 6-month intensive with one another as well. And it was just like, what were the chances of not only meeting another non-binary Santa Muerte devotee, but living right up the street from me? And they
Wow.
needed a place to live when
Yeah.
I was searching for a room, you know,
Wow.
like,
What a beautiful connection too. Like on it just checks so many boxes, and it's lonely being a practitioner, and especially being a practitioner with a spirit of death, you know, and
mhm.
especially like Santisma Muerte, like that. It's so hard to find people like that. So, and a non-binary practitioner, like that's just incredible. That's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. So she was like, "All right, I got you.
Yeah.
You want a roommate? I'll give you a roommate."
And I remember too, like, oh, this is where another time she came in. So Shane and I, he hadn't yet applied for the place yet. And we promised her, like, we're like, hey, if he applies and gets approved, we will build, or not build you, but make you a shared altar in this home. And like, that's a big offering, like, I don't share altars with anyone. And that's normally not something you really do. But Shane and I love each other very much. And we're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's offer her a shared altar space in the living room, if I get approved. And he did. And like, not even like 2-3 days later, I'm walking down my block and I come across this huge dresser. And like, I think I was about to go for a run actually. And I just come across this giant dresser, and I just stopped in my tracks and I was like, that's it. That's clearly what she wants us to make out of her altar. It had a bunch of drawers. It's made of wood and everything. I text a picture to Shane. He's like, oh yeah, that's like it. And we ended up carrying it back to my house. Thankfully it was on the same block as where I live, but like, it just blew me away. And then he got it, like, she came through so quickly after he got approved. She's like, okay, where's my altar? Like, get to work.
That's amazing. Also, like a roommate though is so, those are scary because those even people that you like, when you live with that person, that's a
Mhm.
completely different situation, right? Like they always tell you not to move in with your best friend because then you won't be friends anymore. And having roommates, like I understand why. Thank God I've only had maybe like 2 or 3 not good roommates, but
Mhm.
it's a very specific thing. So like the fact that she just came through like that with not even just somebody good to live with that's like just leaves you alone and does whatever, but like somebody who you can connect with on that level is just, that's a totally different playing field. That's
Like, what are
amazing.
the fucking chances? Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
what are the chances?
No, that's incredible. I think this, yeah, that's about time. I've kept you for I think like 45 minutes already. So I'm going to end this one here, and then I'm going to move over to Patreon with you and have them rapid fire questions at you, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. If you want to let any of my viewers know where to find you, I mean, I'll link everything down below, but if you have anything that you want to like let them know about that's coming up, or if you just like find me at this places, like now's your chance.
Yeah. And so my main page is at the Mestizo Mystic. That's Mestizo on Instagram. There's several imposter accounts going around right now. One's called the
I'll link
Redheaded
the right.
Witch. And I'm just
What?
like, do I look redheaded? But anywho, yeah, just at the Mestizo Mystic. And I do offer tarot readings, but I'm about to start grad school, so it's very much case by case basis right now because I am not gonna have the most free time. And then on Twitter, it's just at Mestizo Mystic. That one's less serious. I just like to shoot my silly little thoughts on there.
And
And then I think I'm on TikTok. I'm on TikTok. I think it's at the Mestizo Mystic as well. Either that or just Mestizo Mystic. And I don't post too often. I'm not a TikTok expert. But you could find me at those 3 places. And then I don't have like a site for tarot readings. Just if you're interested, DM me and we could do a quick consultation to see if it's something that is something I'm worth, or that's worth giving a reading for. Because I don't do like twin flame readings and stuff. I like to give very introspective, spiritual, in-depth readings for people who are seeking to like, bring themselves up and like really actually change their life. Can I do a twin flame reading? Yeah. Do I want to though? Not really. But yeah, that's where you could find me. And yeah.
perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to share this with everybody. I know they're gonna love you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I know we've had like back and forth on Instagram, but this is like our first time talking
I know.
face
It's
to face.
it's
So I was
good to
super
like meet you
excited.
kind of face to face.
Yeah.
That is my interview with Ryan, the Mestizo Mystic, on Instagram. I really hope that you enjoyed as much as I did, and the Patreon exclusive for this one is pretty good, so if you're interested, you should definitely check that one out. And of course, as always, I'll leave all the links down below to find them anywhere that you can find them on the internet. But other than that, that is all that is all that I have for you for this video. And as always, best of luck, be kind to each other, and may your gods treat you as you've treated others. Bye.
I think another thing is like I get really creative with my baneful work too. I mean, I get creative with a lot of my work, but I feel like baneful work, because you get like the point is to be messy. Like it's gonna be messy, you know? And one of my favorite ones that I recently did that I loved was it was more banishing style, but I definitely like made it like a mean banishing. So